The following program, NORML Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting NORML.org, NORML.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of NORML Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of NORML. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents NORML Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, NORML's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Thanks to all of our listeners and all of our supporters out there that make the NORML Network possible. This is all crowdsourced. We got people out there like Cannabob and Rolla J and others who are all a part of this. And there we go. Got to have my mic on. Sorry, I was doing some recording last night. We'll fix it in post. Anyway, welcome to the show. Let's meet up with our engineer, Ganja John. Hi, John.
Wow. Is my mic working? Okay.
Yeah, you're on.
I'm sorry about that.
No, it was on in our headphones. It wasn't coming through on the recording.
Yeah, we're going to have to re-record that opening.
Well, maybe not.
Maybe not.
But we're having some good time, and I want to break some news here, both good news and bad news. What do we want first?
Let's go with the good news.
Okay,
first.
The good news is starting in July, we will be debuting here on the NORML Network a podcast from our good friend, High Times Senior Cultivation Editor Danny Danko will be debuting a podcast. It'll be called High Times Presents Free the Flower with Danny Danko. And, And it will be on Wednesdays, actually. It'll be on Wednesdays at 8 o'clock Eastern. We're going to rearrange the schedule a little bit and have Grateful Dread Peace Media on the weekends. So you'll get a dose of Danny Danko every week on Wednesdays.
It's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
Going to be a lot of fun. Hey, let's go to our virtual studio in Grastoria, Oregon. It's Cannabis Carrie here with us.
Hi. Yeah, I like that new hat today, Russ. What's up with that?
What's that?
I like the new hat today. What's up
thank
with that?
you. Yeah, a guy named Gil gave me this hat at the NORML Conference 2009 in San Francisco.
Ah.
There we go. People know that I like hats. Carrie brings us our news right after the first break. What do we got in the hemp headlines today, Carrie?
Oh, we got a lot of news today. We're going to go down to Arizona where they had an impromptu conference today over dispensaries. Also, President Obama is trying to keep some of his campaign promises to make drug sentencing more fair. We're going to go down to Florida where things are anything but fair when it comes to welfare recipients. And we've got some breaking news. No, they didn't legalize marijuana, but they still are conducting some raids. Yeah,
that's the bad news in our breaking news for the day. It comes to us from our listener, Destruction, who we know from California area, Central California. Raids going on in Fresno. We'll talk about it at the end of our hemp headlines today. We're still getting the news coming in from Destruction, so we're going to reach out to him on Twitter and other social networks, figure out what we can do. All right, we'll be right back after this with your hemp headlines. Stick around. And Dr. Mitch.
This is NORML Show Live. The voice of the Marijuana Nation.
In today's busy world, we're inundated by advertising for all types of pharmaceuticals that come with a laundry list of potential side effects. Shouldn't you have better medical choices? Natural alternatives to pills pushed by Big Pharma? At Alternative Medical Choices, you could choose natural, safe, and effective alternative therapies that are right for your budget without nasty side effects. Cannabis, or marijuana, has been a legal medicine in the Pacific Northwest since 1998. Our doctors will help determine your qualifications for a medical marijuana recommendation in Oregon, no matter where you live. Our massage therapists will ease your aches and stress with soothing hemp seed oil or cannabis-infused massage salves. We also offer acupuncture, Reiki, and other alternative health therapies. Call Alternative Medical Choices in Portland, Oregon at 503-288-5579 or visit our website at www.altmedchoices.com. We specialize in out-of-state recommendations. That's www.altmedchoices.com or call 503-288-5579.
Been busted? Need a lawyer? Call the NORML Legal Committee for an attorney near you. Find one at NORML.org. Remember, attorneys are cheaper than a lifelong criminal drug record.
It's that freedom. I'm free to do it.
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's Normal News with Cannabis Carrie.
The director for the Arizona Department of Health Services met today with members of a group that wants to open dispensaries in Scottsdale, Arizona. Today was the day that the state had planned to begin accepting applications for persons or groups that wanted to open dispensaries, but the Department of Health Director Will Humble met with the group today and politely declined to accept binders from them that held all of their filled-out application papers. Under rules previously adopted by the department, the application process was to take a month beginning today. But as reporters filled a conference room in the department's headquarters to watch the exchange, Mr. Humble presented the group of prospective applicants with a form letter acknowledging their attempt to turn in their paperwork and an explanation of his refusal. He said that it was the uncertainty with the Arizona medical marijuana law due to the recent lawsuit filed on Friday against the U.S. Department of Justice from the state seeking clarity if the Arizona law can be implemented in the face of federal law, which of course says that all marijuana is illegal, regardless of the reason a person may be using it. Will Humble said that it is probably better for the applicant to wait and hear the decision before they invest tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in the new facilities. Director Will Humble made the ultimate decision to not accept any dispensary applications today, but he cited consultation with Governor Jan Brewer's office and legal advice he got from the Attorney General's office. Ryan Hurley, one of the lawyers for a would-be applicant that came to the impromptu conference, said that the state is thwarting the will of the voters and that patients in the state would suffer from these actions. A doctor group led by Dr. Richard Strand, a diagnostic radiologist who is among a group of 4 men, including 2 other physicians that came with their applications filled out to open a dispensary, said he would be reviewing options that include pursuing an administrative appeal or just bypassing that step and challenging the department with a lawsuit to compel the state to at least begin accepting the applications. Even though the state has put dispensary plans on hold, they have been issuing patient cards, about 3,700 so far.
Well, you know, they've got a choice here. They can regulate the dispensation of medical marijuana to what will probably be around 30,000 legal patients in Arizona by the end of the year. Or they cannot regulate the dispensation of marijuana to those 30,000 legal customers. But either way, it is going to happen. People are going to get their medicine. This is, once again, the scare tactics and the stalling from the Arizona governor who just doesn't want to implement the medical marijuana program in the first place. Fortunately, the way that language is written up in Arizona, the patients will be able to grow 12 plants if they are more than 25 miles away from a state-licensed dispensary. And if they don't license any dispensaries, then everybody's more than 25 miles away from a state-licensed dispensary, and everybody gets to grow 12 plants. So you can either regulate it and take some control over it, or you cannot regulate it and allow everybody to grow and everybody to be distributing it amongst themselves. You'd think you'd want to have some control over that, Governor Brewer, but again, you don't like medical marijuana in the first place. You'd rather it would just go away. It's not going to go away. The people are going to continue to use it. It's going to get more and more popular every year. And don't give me these entrepreneurs ought to just wait for the answer first before they go and invest the money. They're entrepreneurs. That's why they make money, is they take risks. They're willing to take the risk. You're not willing to allow them to do so. This is ridiculous, Governor Brewer. It's not going to stand, and eventually we are going to see dispensaries in Arizona.
This isn't a cannabis story per se, but a really important story about the fairness of drug sentencing and its reform. In trying to keep a campaign promise to make drug sentencing more fair, the Obama administration issued a statement today through U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder to the U.S. Sentencing Commission to amend its guidelines to reduce sentences for crack offenses. The harsh prison sentences that were levied against crack defendants in comparison to other cocaine users has long been a source of ire among defense lawyers and civil rights activists because the sentences disproportionately impact minorities. Today, U.S. Attorney General Holder said that the Obama administration not only wants to lower crack sentencing guidelines, but also wants to make the relief retroactive, a move that could reduce the sentences and affect 12,000 federal inmates that may get a get-out-of-jail card much, much earlier than they expected. Holder issued the statement on the matter at a hearing of the Sentencing Commission today, who must authorize retroactive application of the more lenient sentences. According to the Wall Street Journal, people convicted of cocaine offenses would be released over the next 3 years. Holder said in a news conference this morning, quote, "As years of experience and studies have shown, there is simply no just or logical reason why crack punishments should be dramatically more severe than those of other cocaine offenders. The Fair Sentencing Act is considered an historic step forward by equaling out the disparity between penalties for crack and powdered cocaine offenses, but realizing that they have more to do than just pass this legislation going forward. Justice needs to come to those that are being affected by those unfair sentences now. Just 12 months ago, before the Fair Sentencing Act, a person caught with 50 grams of crack cocaine was assumed a dealer and would have to spend 10 years mandatory inside a prison cell. Today, that same sentence is about half of that, or 5 years. This would affect the federal prisoners only, or about 1 in 18 federal prisoners that could see an early release. Statistics bear out that black drug offenders are more likely to be charged with a federal crack offense than other offenders.
Yeah, this is, again, one of these weird situations, actually kind of disgusting when you think about it. The crack powder disparity was originally 100 to 1, right? So like you had to have 100 times as much powder cocaine to get the same sentence as somebody who's got one amount of crack cocaine. It's like 1 gram versus 100 grams, or 5 grams versus 500 grams, right? You had to have 5 grams of crack or half a kilo of powder. Right? So that was disgusting. And Obama campaigned and said, we got to end this crack powder disparity. And so it got through Congress and they ended it. There is no longer a 100 to 1 disparity. It's now 18 to 1. So it's slightly less racist. So anyway, with this new 18 to 1 disparity, they're talking about here now, retroactively, releasing these prisoners based on an 18 to 1 sentencing instead of a 100 to 1 sentencing. Well, that's great news, but it doesn't go far enough. How about releasing the marijuana prisoners who should be on a 0 to 1 sentencing disparity? There should be no sentencing for people in there for marijuana. The Supreme Court just ruled that the state of California has to relieve overcrowding in its prisons by 30,000 prisoners. And right now there's about 1,400 prisoners in California sitting there for marijuana alone. Hey, I know, let's relieve some overcrowding in that federal prison in California where Eddie Lepp is serving 10 years. How about we let Eddie Lepp out of prison? There's a whole bunch of people that don't deserve to be in prison. And prisons nationwide, almost everywhere you look, are at or over capacity. The California prisons are at 200% capacity. The Supreme Court ruling is trying to get them down to 133%. It's ridiculous. Let our people go.
We warned you about this bill coming up the pike, but for Floridians, it may be too late to intervene. Florida Governor Rick Scott signed a controversial bill yesterday that makes welfare recipients in his state have to first submit to a urine, blood, or hair sample for drug testing before they receive any benefits. After signing the bill, he told reporters, quote, "The goal of this is to make sure we don't waste taxpayers' money, and hopefully more people will focus on not using illegal drugs. A positive test will get you an immediate ban on temporary assistance for needy families for 6 months. If you try again for assistance and test positive a second time, you will get a 3-year ban on state assistance for family. Temporary assistance for needy families is a state cash program that's supported by bulk grants from the federal government. It's the best known source of funding for cash welfare for needy families with children. It provides cash for food, medical care, and emergency cash to help struggling families get by. The new drug testing requirements will be costly to the average Floridian. Taxpayers will reimburse welfare applicants for a negative drug test. The applicants themselves of the program must pay for their own test if it comes back positive. The Florida governor says that the program will actually save big dollars as they won't have to give the assistance to those who choose to spend any money on drugs. Some details of the new law: the Department of Children and Families must inform the applicant that they can avoid drug tests if they do not apply for the benefits they are seeking. And the state must assure that each applicant has, and this is a language from the amendment, a reasonable degree of dignity while producing and submitting a sample. And if you are now screaming, what about the children? Parents who fail drug tests can still jump through some hoops and get some benefits for their children if they name a state-approved designator to collect the money, but the designee must also pass a drug test. About 233,000 Floridians applied for cash assistance last year, including 114,000 families. The ACLU of Florida is considering a lawsuit over the new law. A statement from the group's director this morning said, quote, once again, this governor has demonstrated his dismissal of both the law and the right of Floridians to personal privacy by signing into law a bill that treats those who have just lost their jobs like suspected criminals. Howard Simon said in his statement, this is a wasteful program created by this law, and it subjects Floridians who are impacted by the economic downturn, as well as their families, to a humiliating search of their urine and bodily fluids without cause or even suspicion of drug use. But the controversy over the bill doesn't end there. Many Floridians are saying that Rick Scott, a Tea Party-backed conservative, also signed a bill earlier this year to drug test state workers every 3 months. And one company that will most likely benefit from all this drug testing going on in Florida is a company called Solantic that already conducts drug tests on thousands of employees for employers. The company of several chain-like clinics was founded by Florida's governor, Rick Scott, who under pressure sold his share of it just on April 29th. We don't know the specifics of the private business deal, but last year, Scott put the value of his majority share of the company at $62 million in a financial disclosure statement that he had to file to run for office. Sad news.
Well, you know, this Florida thing, it just doesn't go far enough. I mean, these people getting unemployment and child, food stamps and assistance for families, I mean, they could be wasting their money on illegal drugs, on marijuana and cocaine, but how come we're not testing them for whether or not they're drinking beer? You know, these people on welfare, they might be going to the store and buying, Mad Dog 2020 or beer or alcohol and wasting taxpayers' money. And what about cigarettes? These people could be smoking cigarettes and not only endangering their children with the secondhand smoke, but also taking years off their life and costing the state of Florida so much money in health care. Let's test them for their nicotine use too. And you know what else? These people could be cashing their welfare checks and spending it on lottery tickets. They could be buying lottery tickets. They could be going to the track. They could be gambling, trying to make a fast buck. We don't want to see our taxpayers' dollars. I know what we should do. If people are on welfare, right, we should sew a special thing on their jacket, right? Maybe like a star or some sort of symbol there so that we can tell that they're poor and untouchable and that we can make sure that they don't go into casinos. Oh, and fast food restaurants. Let's not have them go into fast food restaurants where they're going to be hurting their kids, their kids' nutritional values there too. And again, costing the taxpayers of Florida more money. We could check, if they have that little star on their jacket, they can't get into a McDonald's. That would be really good. And you know what else really pisses me off is a lot of these poor people, getting the taxpayers' money in Florida, they might be taking their families out to see a movie or something. They might be going out to a theater and going to see a movie and wasting the taxpayers' dollars there with their unemployment money, providing entertainment to their family. So if they've got that little star on them, right, they can't go into the movie theaters there. That way we could certainly save the taxpayers of Florida some money. I hope you all get the Jonathan Swift sarcasm here. This is one of the most offensive things that I ever come across in this war on drugs, is this idea that before someone gets benefits, and some of these benefits are things people have already paid taxes for so that they're entitled to. It's their tax money. And in the case of employment benefits, they've been paying into that too. That you want to talk about them wasting stuff that they're already entitled to just because you don't like the particular substance they may or may not be using. And the ACLU is exactly right on this. Just because someone loses their job or needs some help financially does not mean they are a criminal, does not mean you can suspect them automatically of committing a crime. It's ridiculous, it's offensive, and we will fight this in every state that it comes up.
What do you think about a break, Russ?
Is it break time? I guess it is break time. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about the raids in Fresno when we come back. Yeah, I guess I need a break. We'll be right back after this.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break. If you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support NORML Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would tell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527.
The world's greatest cannabis competition is coming back to the Bay Area. Over 100 strains of medical marijuana will go head-to-head to see who's the dankest in California. Indicas, sativas, hybrids, concentrates, edibles, plus THC, CBD, and CBN testing. The High Times Medical Cannabis Cup, June 25th and 26th at the Concourse Exhibition Center in San Francisco. It's gonna be awesome. Get your tickets at medcancup.com.
It's time for your daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420 friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Today we get tunes for Irie Wednesday, our celebration of that mellow vibe we find in the best of reggae, ska, calypso, and Latin music. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on NORML Show Live, send it to us at stash@normal.org. Now here's some more great independent marijuana music for today's daily Toker Tunes.
All right, folks, before we get on to the tunes, we want to, of course, update you on the breaking news that we announced at the beginning of the show, and that is that there are law enforcement raids going on of medical marijuana providers in Fresno, California as we speak. One of our listeners, a good friend of the show, Destruction, tweeted out to us. Now, he works at, what is it, John? Is it MBC?
Mind, Body, and Soul Collective.
Okay, so he works at Mind, Body, and Soul, and he says that their collective has not yet been raided, doesn't know if it's going to be.
No, but they're not closing their doors.
Yeah, he says, we're staying open. And apparently 4 locations with DEA and IRS in attendance.
Yes, and apparently FBI.
Oh, FBI.
Yeah. In addition, so
and he mention anything about warrants or knowing whether there's warrants?
Nope, has no idea what's going on. As people just coming into a shop and telling him what's happening, and nobody really knows.
Okay, we will keep up on this, and we'll bring you more information in hour 2 in our Toker Talk Radio, and hopefully we can get Destruction on the line, on the phone, and talk about this. If you're in the Fresno area or know someone in the Fresno area who can get us more on this breaking news story, please have them contact us. John, what's the best way they could get you right now? Through Twitter here?
Yeah, at Ganja John. I'll be checking it.
At Ganja Jon. We'll watch the Twitter feed, so if you've got more Fresno information, please let us know. All right, we're going to turn over to our Irie Wednesday Daily Toker tune, and this next band, good friends of the show as well, gave us permission for all of their tunes. We met Rory at one of the gigs that we were at here, gave us a nice little shout out as well. And do you need know more about the band or the tune here, John?
I don't know a lot about this. Is from their first album called Revolution, and it came out in 2006. And you'll be hearing a lot more of this band on NORML Show Live. So here's a tune, Educated Fools.
Marijuana and alcohol are the 2 most popular recreational drugs in America. Marijuana smoking is non-toxic, relatively safe, and has a low risk of dependence. Alcohol drinking is potentially fatal.
On the television screen, telling us these lies, if you know what I mean. Why do we politicians are on a mission, telling us lies through the television. Another string being pulled by these educated fools who have the money to get what they want. Now it's time we give them what they need. So come on, people, this is our mission. Open up your eyes and see. We know they do not know what they do, but they lie every day to me and you. These educated fools, educated fools, educated fools, educated fools. We see their faces on the television screen, telling us these lies, if you know what I mean. Why do we follow? Why do we believe the words that they say when we know they deceive? Also, here's an opportunity to see the big picture. Don't fall through these fake idols and fixtures. We're coming up now, excuse me, mister. This is our time to shine, yeah. We know they do not know what they do, but they lie every day to me and you. These educated fools, educated fools, educated fools, educated fools.
What's up, guys? I'm Rory from Revolution, chilling at the Spring Fest, San Bernardino, California. Just chilling at the Normal Live. Want to say what's up and keep it green.
You want a copy of that song for your iPod? Check out the Daily Toker Tunes at the Stash blog by surfing to stash.normal.org and choosing Media, and then Toker Tunes from the main menu.
As High Times Senior Cultivation Editor, I'm often called into the field and asked to sample or even identify exotic strains of marijuana in their natural habitat. Now, for the first time, I've compiled more than 120 of my favorite strains into this single field guide designed to fit into your pocket as you travel the world in search of your favorite plant. From a friend's closet grow room to the wilds of Northern California, this single guide covers all of today's best-known strains, plus heirlooms and throwbacks, including High Times quality photos and information on each variety's genetic heritage and growing characteristics, plus my personal notes on aroma, flavor, and potency. So this is Danny Danko, author of the official High Times Field Guide to Marijuana Strains, wishing you good times and great ganja.
The official High Times Field Guide to Marijuana Strains is available at hightimes.com and finer bookstores.
It's time for Normal Show Live's Cannabis Science with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Earlywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York in Albany and the author of Understanding Marijuana. Now here's your dose of cannabis science.
All right, we had a week off with Dr. Mitch. We're glad to have you back this week. How are you, sir?
Oh, glad to be back.
Oh, glad to have you here. All right, it's June, it's summertime, and we're looking forward to seeing if there's any new cannabis science studies or information we should know about.
That work on THC, basically decreasing viral load in monkeys with monkey HIV, is finally out, and I think this is really huge. They basically gave monkeys THC and no other antiretrovirals or anything like that. At 6-month follow-up, more of those monkeys were alive than the monkeys who didn't get the THC, and I think that's about the most compelling outcome variable you can imagine. They also had basically a trend towards hanging on to more body weight and better numbers on their immune function, and I feel like this is really huge. I'm surprised it's not getting more press. And I, want to make sure everybody understands that THC is not a cure for AIDS or certainly not a prevention of it. But this shows incredible promise for cannabinoid medicine and basically battling one of the worst chronic diseases we have in the world.
Yeah. Well, we know that, the medical marijuana movement started in the early 90s in San Francisco when so many of the HIV/AIDS patients were going to Brownie Mary and Dennis Perone and those folks there that were opening up the first cannabis clubs. And, we've always thought of it, as far as HIV/AIDS goes, as being something that alleviates the wasting syndromes and the pain and things that patients might be dealing with. Had anyone ever posited that the use of medical marijuana might actually be affecting the viral loads and the disease within humans before they started looking at the study? I imagine they must have, if this is why they went forward with the study.
As it turns out, this is a lab that was, I think, trying to show that this was going to hurt, that medical marijuana was not going to be good for HIV. I really feel like these investigators, if anything, were biased against the plant, and so I found it particularly delightful that they had to report that HIV status was essentially improved after months of THC treatment. Pharmacologically, it doesn't have a direct route, but we do know the cannabinoids are big in the immune system anyway. And with humans, it was always unclear because they were always on antiretroviral drugs. So some of the previous work we've shown where marijuana didn't hurt HIV patients, nobody thought to attribute it actually helping because of the compound with the other drugs. But this is as clean a study as it could be on this, and I feel like if this replicates, this is going to be huge for the medical marijuana movement, and anybody who can really point to anybody with AIDS and say you can't have marijuana is just unjust and ridiculous.
Well, it sounds a lot like the story of Dr. Tashkin's work at UCLA, the pulmonologist. We heard for so long from the reefer madness prohibitionists that, marijuana causes lung cancer. It's got as much tar as 400 cigarettes, etc. And so he went to go prove that and found just the opposite, that people that were smoking cannabis seem to have less incidence of head, neck, and lung cancer. Similar situation then with the AIDS research. Our opponents say so often that, marijuana lowers the immune system. It's terrible for the immune system. Why would you give it to an AIDS patient? Is that what they were trying to prove?
Basically, Tashkin's literature was only on lung cancer, but he definitely had lower risk for lung cancer in the folks who smoked cigarettes and cannabis than the folks who smoked cigarettes alone. And obviously, I'm not saying smoke cannabis if you're going to smoke cigarettes. I'd rather see folks quit cigarettes. But these AIDS researchers were very much into that. Oh, let's show how this is bad. And in fact, it turned out good. And I think that's really hard to dispute given the size of these effects and the magnitude of this. We'll have to see a replication, but I feel like no one can say patients shouldn't smoke pot.
Yeah, I always say that the kryptonite to prohibition is data. And I love when they put these studies together trying to prove something terrible that's been, anecdotally reported and repeated by law enforcement. And then they find that, wow, it actually turned out to be somewhat beneficial. So that's great news. I'm so glad to hear that. Want to remind folks in the audience, too, that if you've got questions for Dr. Mitch Earlywine, you can send them into our chat room. Just put the word question before it. That helps Carrie to be able to pick them out for us. Or you can give us a call live at 971-533-7111. And Dr. Mitch, I also wanted, before we take the first question here, I wanted to get your comments on the report that we put out this week showing there to be between 1 million and 1.5 million medical marijuana patients registered or legal in the United States, and what you might think about that data.
It's interesting because this is really relying on, a lot of these are actual state registries. California doesn't have it, but I feel like those numbers are certainly within a reasonable range, if not underestimates, of the number of medical marijuana patients in California. And when you add it up, it really is 1 million people. And I feel like even that's, an underestimation of the actual number of folks who are using cannabis medicinally in some way. Obviously, this is a big enough number that this can't be ignored any longer, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the medical marijuana movement pick up on this momentum and see more and more medical marijuana states.
Yeah, and it's also an interesting, as I was crunching these numbers, I found interesting comparisons in how well the programs were utilized in particular states. For example, in California, when you look at the National Survey on Drug Use and Health numbers, they say that about 6.4% of the adult population is using cannabis monthly, and then they have about, 2 to 3% of their people using it medically. But we go up to Vermont and Rhode Island, where they're over 10% monthly use of adults. Their programs only have, less than 0.5% of their people registered. So I think that kind of shows how difficult some of these states make it for people who are probably using medical marijuana medically to be able to do so legally. Your thoughts on that?
Well, and I really feel like the whole need for a registry is something we need to question. I'm on a cholesterol-lowering med. Does that mean I have to be in some national registry? No, Of course not. And so I think it's really unfair to say you have to be on one of these. I can get opiates prescribed and don't have to have a big list in some state place somewhere in the same way. It's really unfair.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take some questions now from our chat room. And Damon Alexander wants to know if you looked into the difference between using hot or cold water in your bong or water pipe.
So it's a little bit deceptive, but as it turns out, the cold water kind of leads people to this false sense of security, if you will, and they end up holding their hits longer. And holding your hit longer, despite the phenomenology of it, doesn't really get more THC into your bloodstream. When THC hits the capillaries in the lungs, it's pretty much absorbed right away. There's no need for these 45-second lung buster hits. Unfortunately, with cold water, the smoke is colder, people can hold it in longer, and actually they're giving the irritants more opportunity to get attached to their lungs. So as much as we all may love our water pipes, I'm afraid the cold water is not as good as a vaporizer just inhaled and exhaled.
So it's how the coolness of the smoke may lead you to hold the smoke longer, not necessarily that the heat of the water really makes any difference in how much THC is getting through or how much tar is being filtered out or whatever.
That's exactly the case.
Okay. I got a short question here from Free Texas 2012, and sometimes I think these things come up as rhetoricals, but then I see something in it and I think, I can make a question out of this. He asked, what the hell is a chronic dose? But, we often hear these studies and we hear government, propaganda coming out about, chronic users and chronic use of marijuana. What is the definition when they use that term? Is there a specific definition to how much you're using per day or per week that makes you a chronic user?
Generally, the problem has been more focused on frequency than amount. And actually, I published a paper on this before. When people are focusing on frequency, they really are missing out on part of the data. So in a lot of the cognitive literature, if you've used every day for 2 years, you're considered a chronic user. Other studies, anyone who's used 50 times or more ends up in the heavy use group. Now, obviously, some of our listeners would find that completely laughable, and for good reason. In truth, we don't see the cognitive effects until 2 years of daily use, and even then, it's these really minor things where you have to really, go into the EEG waves to try to find them. And even then, I'm always suspicious because here's somebody who's smoked pot every day for 2 years, and then they're supposed to come to the lab without smoking pot that day. So I feel like the acute and chronic effects are sometimes confounded. As far as amounts are concerned, with these monkey data we just talked about, the HIV, it's 0.32 grams per kilogram for the monkeys. That'd be about 2 grams a day for somebody like Anji John. So it's really. They're cranking it up in a lot of these studies, and I don't know what that sounds like to some people, but that sounds like a hell of a lot of pot to me.
Sounds awesome.
Well, we did the estimate, the estimate in that California NORML data and the NORML data that we published. We were estimating frequency of use for medical marijuana patients at between 0.5 gram to 1 gram per day. And I know Dale was getting some of his numbers from these Oakland patient centers and Berkeley patient group and so on, reporting what their patients were telling them. But do we have really any knowledge of how much medical marijuana patients are using per day, or what's a standard dose?
In a big survey that I did of just folks on the NORML listserv, that was pretty much the deal. So between 0.5 and 1 gram per day for medical users, and markedly less than that for recreational users, often less than 1 gram a week. So.
Grand Poobah is on the record as saying 2 grams a day doesn't get me through coffee. Okay. Let's go to the next question. An anonymous question coming here, or maybe it's from Carrie, I'm not sure. But the question is, why are doctors so afraid of marijuana? Are any American medical schools teaching herbal-based therapies or even cannabis therapies in the medical marijuana states? I would imagine, like we got medical schools in all these medical marijuana states. Are they teaching doctors about medical marijuana?
So when I left USC, we had one big lecture day for those medical students on medical cannabis, and that seems to have kept going after I left, thanks to some wonderful folks in the pharmacology program there. I've given the occasional lectures to med students in other states, but it's really not covered very well. But I hate to say it, a whole lot of things are not covered very well in medical school. So, the fact is, there's a lot to learn and not a lot of time to learn it, and I think spreading the word on this is great. I'd love to see the continuing ed programs that some of our colleagues have put together for physicians continue, and the fact that physicians should be able to get continuing education credits on this so that they don't have to be afraid. Now, if you're a non-medical marijuana state, yeah, they're petrified because not only don't they want to be on record as writing you a recommendation, they're concerned about putting it in your, even if they're not, they're concerned about putting it in your file. So, my physician certainly has a copy of my book, but would never write down, this is the stoner guy in my records, thank goodness, in part because he's worried about crazy backlash and other things that might happen.
I can tell you right now, I just got a copy of my medical records, and I was under the impression that my doctor and I was telling him in confidence that I was a marijuana smoker, and that he wouldn't share that with the transplant team. And I found out he shared it with the transplant team the first time I told him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm in Oregon. I'm not really super worried about it. I mean, I could have been screwed on my transplant because of that. But if you don't have to tell your doctor that you're a recreational smoker or you're smoking medically, don't do it.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting situation there.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get a next question here from Phoenix Rocker. Wants to know, do the small auto... Well, you know what? I'm going to save this question for Danny Danko because it's more of a strain question. So let me move on to the next one that we got in our chat room. And you can still get your questions in here, but if we don't get them on the air today, you can join us next Wednesday, or you can send your question by email to Dr. Mitch at 420research@gmail.com. That's 420research@gmail.com. All right, let's get to this question from the laid-back lumberjack, and I already know the answer, and it's something Dr. Mitch has warned us about before, but the question is, what amount of THC does resin have in it? I refuse to smoke it, but some of my friends seem to like it.
Sad but true, THC is destroyed at the temperature of fire, basically. So scraping that resin off the bowl and smoking it and thinking it's getting you really, really high really is a product of holding your breath. And every time I say this, I get a bunch of angry emails like, dude, I totally get baked off my resin. And I'm like, I believe you, but hold your breath really long for 10 times and see how baked you feel then.
Okay. Kubato has a question on what amount or how many multiple sclerosis patients are using cannabis for treatment. And basically he's wanting to know how well does the medical community and the multiple sclerosis community know, how much do they know and how much do they support medical marijuana use?
So the data on MS are very disparate in part because that's a disorder that's very disparate. So folks who use it for pain and muscle spasm and things like that really seem to benefit, particularly given the problems MS and sleep that seem to go together. Mm-hmm. Other folks, because of the symptom profile that they have, cannabis isn't necessarily all that helpful to them, depending upon, really what are their complaints. And this seems to be incredibly strain sensitive. So some of the more invigorating sativa type strains don't seem to be helping them as much as the more stereotypical indica sedating strains.
Okay. Matter of Liberty's got a great question here, and it follows up on a technique I've spoken of called phytoremediation. We talked about how they plant industrial hemp in places like Chernobyl, and it phytoremediates the soil. It pulls out, it leaches out the heavy metals and the radioactivity out of the soil and helps to replenish that nature. And so based on that, there's this question. Since cannabis can pick up lead and mercury and heavy metals, is it possible that users consuming he calls them heavy metal plants, may have been the root of the myth of schizophrenia associated with cannabis. Could it be possible cannabis plants are picking up these heavy metals, and it's the metals that are leading to psychosis and schizophrenia, not cannabis?
At least as far as schizophrenia is concerned, probably not. If they were incredibly high-dose users of some outrageously contaminated strains, they could end up with essentially lead poisoning, which does have the psychotic features. Some of the other heavy metals also create deficits that mimic some of the psychoses. It's a neat idea, particularly given the variation we see in in allegedly cannabis-induced schizophrenia. I think it's something that's worth really looking into, but it is not investigated well at all.
Okay, and we'll have to finish it up here with one final question from Randy1971, who wants to know, is marijuana safe before and after surgery? I guess, is there problems with respect to, it interfering with anesthesia or recovery or anything like that?
We don't have any compelling data either way, but in truth, if you think about it pharmacologically, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to go into surgery high, but if you'd used recently, there's certainly not going to be any problem with clotting or reactions to anesthesia or things like that. In contrast, alcohol can really be an anesthesiology nightmare. If you're a high-tolerant drinker, it can be rough to keep you under with anesthesia, and it creates some really cumbersome predicaments.
All right. Well, we got to end it there. Dr. Mitch Earlywine is a professor at SUNY Albany and joins us every week on Wednesdays for our Cannabis Science segment. We also take questions on cannabis health and the history and the culture. So join us next Wednesday or send your email questions to 420research@gmail.com. Thanks so much, Dr. Mitch, and have yourself a great summer.
Thank you, Russ.
It's tough talking to kids about marijuana, especially if you might be a parent who dabbled a time or two in your youth. So to help you out, get your copy of Dr. Mitch Earlywine's latest book, A Parent's Guide to Marijuana. Dr. Earlywine is an associate professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and an expert on the studies concerning marijuana, its effect on health and society, and the methodology behind the statistics. He is a frequent guest here on our daily audio stash. Dr. Earlywine lays it all out without the propaganda and scare tactics that parents know won't work with teenagers. He presents a rational understanding of cannabis, what it is and what it isn't, and why kids shouldn't be using marijuana. You can order today through Amazon.com or check our links at our blog, stash.normal.org.
You want to legalize it? Call your congressman today. 202-224-3121. It's free, it's easy, and you don't even have to give your name, just your zip code, and they'll hook you up to your congressman. Call 202-224-3121 and tell Congress you support marijuana legalization.
Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind.
Normal Show Live reminds you to never consent to a search. If you're holding and you consent, in most states you will be arrested immediately and you will go to jail. If you don't consent to a search, police may try to intimidate you by threatening to bring in drug-sniffing dogs or try to fool you by saying things will go easier if you consent. Yeah, easier for them, sure. Stand your ground, refuse the search, and ask the officer if you're free to go. If they still detain you and eventually find your contraband, you'll be no more busted than if you had allowed the search. But by refusing the search, your attorney has a chance to win your acquittal before a judge. If you consent to the search, your attorney's hands are tied. You can find a list of NORML Legal Committee attorneys specializing in marijuana cases by visiting the Find a Lawyer link at normal.org.
You want answers? I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
We opened our show with news, just about 3 minutes before we went on the air. We got the tweet from our friend Destruction, who's there in Fresno, California, working at Mind, Body, and Soul Collective, that there was yet more raids going on. Not at his collective, but in 4 locations in the Fresno area with FBI and IRS. I think, did he mention DEA?
Yeah,
DEA as well. More raids going on. 4 more raids. And of course, this is on the heels of the big 26 raids and more that they had in Montana, the 2 or 3 different instances of raids that they have up in Spokane, Washington. The raids are going on everywhere. And, I remember in 2008, we had a presidential election, and I thought I voted for Barack Obama, a guy who said that he wasn't going to waste scarce federal resources going after people that are using medical marijuana. Mr. Obama, these raids need to stop now. This is something you have direct control over, and it's something that does not need to happen. Now, we know why it's happening. We can see the writing on the wall. We can see the pharmaceutical companies are starting to understand that the battle over medical marijuana has been won, and we won it. That's just because we had truth, facts, logic, and 5,000 years of history on our side that showed, yes, indeed, marijuana has amazing medical properties, and it works in a synergistic and holistic way over all of the body's systems. The endocannabinoid system, which is a part of just about every system and regulating every system we have in our body. So the science is out. They cannot deny that anymore. So the writing on the wall here is the pharmaceutical companies realize if you can't beat them, join them. And that's what they're trying to do here. We know about the DEA being requested to legalize the use of naturally occurring THC for use in generic Marinol. The patent on Marinol is ending very soon, and this Marinol is right now a synthetic THC. It's made in a lab. It's very expensive to make, and they suspend it in a sesame oil capsule. And these pills end up costing people upwards of $20 a pill. This very expensive pill now is going to become less expensive through the use of natural THC. Now, we've got a farm at the University of Mississippi, which is the U.S. government's pot farm. It grows marijuana for 4 remaining patients on the investigative new drug program, people that go back to the 1970s as far as their use of medical marijuana. Yet the government refuses to ever survey them or test them or find out whether the medical marijuana actually worked. Regardless, we've got this University of Mississippi pot farm growing the medical marijuana down there, growing marijuana as part of the Single Convention Treaty, which basically a UN treaty from 1961 that says if a government's going to grow any number of these substances, that it has to be controlled, it has to be in one location, yada, yada, yada. So these pharmaceutical companies, and now 55 unnamed companies, have been lining up and requesting that they be able to get naturally derived THC from the government's pot farm for use in generic Marinol pills. In generic, and not just Marinol, but for also other cannabinoid therapy type systems, right? So basically what they want to do is, if the government grows a pot plant and gets THC out of that and puts it in a pill, a spray, an inhaler, or a tincture, then it's a Schedule III legal medicine that anyone can prescribe. But if you grow a pot plant, or your collective grows a pot plant, or your state government grows a pot plant, and you extract the THC out of that, either through burning it, vaporizing it, or making tinctures, brownies, whatever, well, that's a deadly dangerous Schedule I drug, and the feds got to lock you up. And the reason why it's deadly and dangerous is not because it's deadly and dangerous to you or I or the environment or the children or traffic safety or workplace safety or productivity or anything. It's deadly dangerous to the paradigm of the pharmaceutical, doctor, rehab, prison, industrial complex. That's what it's deadly dangerous to. It's deadly dangerous to the notion that healthcare ought to be controlled by some independent third-party for-profit entity that jacks up the prices of natural botanicals by synthesizing them and controlling them in dose-regulated systems and charging you out the yahoo for it. That's what it's deadly dangerous to. So, Mr. Obama, we're quite well aware of why things are happening the way they are now. Just like any good enforcer, you need to send in, the troublemakers to rough up the competition so that your buddies in the pharmaceutical companies who give millions and millions of dollars in campaign contributions, and let's not kid each other here, after Citizens United and some other recent Supreme Court decisions, it's really about how many votes you can buy and how much money you can raise to buy attack ads and such. So we know it's going to cost you $1 billion for your reelection, and certainly these medical marijuana providers aren't kicking out a whole lot of campaign funds. So I understand. You got to get the money where you can get it. So you're doing the bidding of your pharmaceutical buddies here by conducting these raids on places that you'd like to characterize as illegal drug dealers, as, taking advantage or abusing a medical marijuana law, when in actuality what we are looking at is the natural result of the laws of supply and demand. We reported on Tuesday this week that there are between 1 and 1.5 million legal medical marijuana patients in the United States. Where are those people getting their medicine? Now, they are allowed to grow plants. They're allowed to grow upwards of 24 million legal marijuana plants in this country. But it's tough. It's intensive work. It's something you got to pay attention to all the time. If you're a cancer patient, you got better things to worry about. If you're ill and infirm, if you're in a wheelchair or paralyzed, getting on your hands and knees and working in the soil maybe isn't the vocation for you. So because of the laws of supply and demand, compassionate people who, yes, want to make a living. Sure, they want to make a living. Sure, they want to see their businesses thrive. But people who are compassionate enough to take on that federal risk have put together these co-ops, clubs, dispensaries, whatever you want to call them, to try to get this medicine to its legal consumers. You cannot legalize the demand side of a market and not expect the supply side to crop up to supply it. It's going to happen. No matter what you think of it, no matter whether you think it's immoral or abuse or whatever, the fact is that with 1 to 1.5 million legal marijuana users in this country, someone's going to appear to supply them. And that gets back to these raids. Because you recognize there's 1.5 million Americans who are legally entitled to use marijuana. And you recognize that there are 15 million adults in this country who are using marijuana every month. A lot of them using it medically as well, but doing it on the down low because they're in Oklahoma or Florida or Kansas or something. And you recognize that that's a huge, huge market for synthetic Marinol pills, for natural Marinol pills, for Sativex sprays, for tinctures, and all sorts of things we haven't even thought of yet. And you just can't stand the idea of that market being controlled by the people and building jobs and local tax revenue. You're so beholden to those campaign contributions and those big pharma lobbyists that you've just got to be supplying that market yourself. You cannot stand to lose that battle, and you're using the force of law and guns and cells and handcuffs and taking people's kids and destroying their businesses and stealing their bank accounts in order to try to win in this marketplace. So much for the free market, right? And we've estimated that if these people are using a gram to a half gram to a gram per day, these patients, that the legal ones right now, the 1 to 1.5 million legal ones right now, are spending between $2.3 billion and $6.2 billion every year. So, Mr. Obama, you're not fooling us. We know why the raids are going on. We understand why thugs rough up the competition. We watch The Sopranos. We watch The Wire. We know how drug dealing works. It's just we're not going to stand for it anymore. We're going to continue to build dispensaries and clubs and co-ops, and we're going to overgrow the government. You cannot stop this plant, and you cannot stop the people that have been using it for 5,000 years. You can beat us, or you can join us. I suggest you join us and just allow marijuana to be legal for us all. The benefits to this country and the benefits to not spending all that money locking people up will be much greater than any sort of pharmaceutical company's quarterly profit sheet. Thanks for listening, folks. That's the Radical Rant for today, and we'll be back tomorrow with more news and interviews you can use for the cannabis community.
This is NORML Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.
All right, stick around. We got hour 2 coming up. We'll give you more information on the raids in Fresno, California, and more discussion of the data we've been talking about. For Cannabis Carrie and Ganja John, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
It goes down smooth.